From CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. In 2022, Florida Power & Light reported net income of $3.7 billion. In 2023, that number grew to $4.5 billion. And in 2024, it raked in yet another $4.5 billion. Now, net income is one of those tricky accounting terms, but it is safe to say that most of that $13 billion FPL brought in the last 3 years, well, that was all profit. Billions and billions of dollars in profit. And yet, in February, FPL proposed the largest rate hike in U.S. history, a rate increase that would add another $10 billion to their bottom line. FPL's proposal was met with widespread condemnation. Some of the largest and most politically powerful business groups in the state came out against it, including companies like Walmart and Wawa, which use a lot of electricity. So what happened next? Well, FPL reached what it called a settlement with those big corporations and trade groups. And to no one's surprise, the settlement protects those big, powerful corporations and does little to help small businesses and their regular customers. Critics say that under this settlement, residential customers could see their electric bills go up 17% over the next 2 years. And let's face it, it's not as if you have a choice of where to get your power from. You can't get it somewhere else. FPL is a state-sanctioned monopoly. Now, when the so-called settlement was announced earlier this month, the president of FPL hailed it in a statement. This settlement agreement is a win for all FPL customers and a win for Florida. It supports our ongoing commitment to meet the resiliency and reliability needs of our fast-growing state while keeping customer bills well below the national average. As you can imagine, FPL's critics scoff at the notion that FPL is looking out for the little guy in their proposals. The AARP in Florida said the proposal would hurt seniors who live on fixed incomes. This settlement leaves residential customers on the hook while corporations get special treatment. The rate hike still needs to be approved by the state's Public Service Commission. This week, I spoke to Bradley Marshall, an attorney for Florida Rising and several other groups who oppose FPL's rate hike.
There are a lot of terms in that settlement, and they would drastically raise rates, and especially as compared to the case FPL originally filed, those rate increases would be disproportionately borne by residential and small business customers. For example, small business customers specifically are facing more than triple the rate increase that FPL had originally proposed. And so FPL is going around saying that they've reduced their request as part of the settlement they reached with a lot of their corporate customers, but the most benefits of that reduction are going to those corporate customers that agreed to the settlement, leaving residential customers and small business customers to pay for this, what we still think is a golden deal for Florida Power & Light and for their corporate customers in the form of a vastly reduced rate increase and in the form of higher credits to be interruptible customers.
So obviously, when we're talking about the different customers, there are different categories. You seem to be referring to some of their larger corporate clients, such as I understand it, Publix, Wawa. What are some of the other corporations that they seem to have structured a deal with that is favorable to them at the expense of consumers? Who are some of the other corporations?
So you mentioned some of them. Walmart would be another one. They're a party that specifically intervened in the case and have signed off on the settlement with Florida Power & Light Company. But most of them hide behind these amorphous groups that you really can't tell who's behind them, like the Florida Industrial Power Users Group, for example. We've been trying to find out who's behind that group, and we just found that they're going to move to quash our discovery to try to find out who's behind them.
So is it literally that some of those other corporations, the bigger corporations, will have a different rate schedule than the average consumer will, or small business will?
Absolutely, and that's actually, and I'll defend that as an idea. It does cost different amounts to serve your average residential customer versus for example, your big factory. And so to some extent, it makes sense to charge those customers different rates for energy or demand or to be a customer of Florida Power and Light. And we have actually what's called cost of service, which is various methodologies to assign costs to those different customer classes. And one of the things Florida Power and Light did when they originally filed their case was file all these cost of service studies to justify the different costs assigned to the different customer classes. What happened when FPL made this deal with some of their largest corporate customers is they threw all of that out and said, we're just going to ignore that and give this enormous reduction from what was proposed to our corporate customers and this enormous increase from what was proposed to small business customers. And that's what doesn't make any sense and is completely unfair.
Not just small business customers, but also folks in their homes, residential users, correct?
But also residential customers who are getting a slight reduction from what was originally proposed by FPL, but not nearly the reduction they should be given the new overall rate increase that Florida Power and Light is asking for.
Am I correct in saying that this is the largest rate hike in U.S. history? For any utility?
We believe so. We've been searching to try to find a bigger one, and we have not. We believe this is the largest rate hike in U.S. history.
All right. Now, ultimately, this has to be approved by the Public Service Commission. That's the utility regulator for the state of Florida that oversees this. That is a position to be a member of the PSC. You're appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. When do we know? When will the Public Service Commission be convening to make its decision? Will they be holding testimony? Will they be holding hearings? What is the status of that as this process is moving forward?
Currently, it's been scheduled for a 2-week hearing in October, following which all the parties are expected and scheduled to have the opportunity to brief their positions and their arguments based on what happens at the hearing. And then sometime after that, probably towards the end of November, we expect. I don't think we have an exact schedule yet. We would expect the Public Service Commission to make a decision on Florida Power and Light's proposed settlement.
The Office of Public Counsel has filed its own action in this case. Can you explain to me what the OPC, the Office of Public Counsel, is and what they are attempting to do?
Yes. So Florida, the legislature established the Office of Public Counsel to represent the citizens of the state of Florida in utility rate-making proceedings. And so they are charged with representing basically all of Florida Power and Light's customers and trying to ensure a fair, just, and reasonable outcome. And what's happened is they have filed a settlement with our clients, Florida Rising, LULAC, and EcoSwift, that we think is very generous to Florida Power and Light, gives them the highest return on equity of any utility in the lower 48 states, but also drastically reduces their rate increase request and treats all customer classes fairly using the cost of service methodology, a compromise cost of service methodology that actually assigns the costs each class is responsible to those classes. And so as a result, the rate increase proposed for residential customers and small business customers under the settlement we reached with the Office of Public Counsel is a lot smaller than that in FPL's proposed settlement.
So in the settlement that OPC is proposing, they still grant that major corporations, because of their usage, because of the costs associated with them, do receive some benefit that's better than the average consumer, but just not to the extent that FPL was trying to achieve. Is that a fair way to say it?
That's completely correct.
And, you know, when you say that the Office of Public Counsel has made a proposal, do they have much power in the way of being able to actually move something forward, or are they just simply a group that will be heard as part of the Public Service Commission hearings in a few weeks in October when this is all taken up?
We hope that the Public Service Commission will give the settlement that we reached with the Office of Public Counsel equal rate and consideration as the settlement that FPL reached. We believe that when weighed against each other, it's clear that the one we reached is actually in the public interest and results in fair, just, and reasonable and non-discriminatory rates, which is also a requirement under Florida law. And we just don't think FPL settlement does that. And so since the Office of Public Counsel is charged by Florida law with representing the citizens of the state, we certainly hope that the Public Service Commission will give that a lot of weight.
Typically, it seems like the consumer or small business owners don't have a lot of political clout, certainly not the same political clout that some of these major corporations that we're talking about, whether it's Walmart, whether it's these industry groups, whether it's Publix, would have. But there does seem to be one group that does have some political clout in Florida that my understanding is they're upset by this FPL settlement, and that's the AARP, because they know what the impact of these rate hikes will have on seniors who are on fixed income. I know you don't represent them, but can you talk a little bit about that? Am I correct in saying that the AARP is opposing this?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I don't speak for the AARP, but they have come out with very strong statements against the settlement that FPL reached with those special interest large corporate customers of theirs. And AARP has been a tremendous advocate for residential customers and arguing that these massive rate increases, this one specifically, should be denied.
We'll have more on this in the weeks ahead, you can be sure.